So, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Good morning, everyone. So, we're going to continue with Give Me a Word. We're on page 191 with St. Macarius the Egyptian, number 38. So, we got halfway through this story where St. Macarius was walking through the desert, and he happened to find a skull of a dead person. And he sort of tapped it and said, "Who are you?" And he said, I was the high priest of the idols and of the pagans who used to live in this place. But you are the spirit-bearing Abba Macarius. And he said, whenever you feel compassion for those in punishment in hell and pray for them, they are a little relieved. And then so St. Macarius said to them, well, what is this relief that they feel? And he goes on to say how much fire they're in. And it says that nobody can see another face to face because it's as if the face of each one is glued to the back of the other. So in other words, so you're just there things are arranged in such a way in hell that even though there are other people there, it's as if you can't get a sense of their presence. You can't see them. And this is something actually very interesting because yes, come in. A good friend of mine, Father Stephen Muse, he once said that perhaps one of the most painful tortures in hell is the fact that you have the sense that you're all alone, that you can't be sharing your pain or your with anyone because you don't have connections, you don't have relationships once you're in hell. And he said, and to demonstrate this point, what he would do is he would often ask people, he would say, what would you, if you had a choice between two things, either being in paradise for all eternity, where there's everything beautiful and pleasant, but you're the only one there, you're completely alone, or to be in hell, but to have other people with you and to have some sort of camaraderie at least. And he says everyone would always, everyone he's ever asked, always chose rather be in hell and to have camaraderie, be with people, because being alone, entirely alone, having no relationship with anyone, is something so painful. It just beyond what we can bear. And at least if we have someone else, at least there's some sort of consolation with the other person. Yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, that's okay.
Interrupting the teacher.
No. I like it when you ask questions. Yes.
I was listening to a little YouTube on Father Paisios.
Can you hold that to your mouth?
Yeah. Thank you, Father.
Yeah.
Like this.
Yeah. Because other people are watching online or listening online.
Father, Father Paisios said that in hell, people are not facing each other. They're like.
Exactly. And that's exactly what St. Macarius is saying. And this is where he got it from.
Right.
Yes.
But they don't see each other. So therefore they're still lonely.
Yeah.
Even though they know the other people there, they cannot see their faces.
Yes.
And they have their backs to each other.
Yeah.
And it's all dark.
Yeah. And so this but then the amazing thing here is that when someone prays, and then this person who's in hell talking to St. Macarius says, so when you pray for us, one has a partial glimpse of the face of another, and that is the relief. And this is something though, and then this was so moving to St. Macarius. He just wept and he heard this and said, sad was the day in which a person was born, if this is the only relief from punishment they have. And then he goes, and then St. Macarius goes on to say, is there another punishment worse than what you have, this one? And then the voice from the skull said to him, yes, there is a greater punishment beneath us. And the elder said, well, who are in this punishment? And then the skull said to him, we who did not know God are at least a little pitied. But they who knew God but denied him and did not do his will, they are down below us. And so what this shows, this is just the result of what Christ had warned us. He says that if a servant if there are two servants that have a master, and neither of them does what the master wants, but one of them knew what his master wanted, the other one didn't know. Well, Christ says that the one who knew the master's will get beaten with many stripes, as they say, with many whippings, whereas the one who didn't know the master's will be beaten with fewer whippings. But the important thing here is that they're both getting whipped. They're both getting punished. And so what this means is that in these people who didn't know Christ, like this pagan priest, he didn't realize he never met Christians because of before Christ, and he never understood the gospel or the message of the Old Testament either. And since he didn't have any connection with the real God, he ended up losing his salvation. But it wasn't as bad as it could be for people who knew Christ and then still lost their salvation. Yeah, so that's of course very scary for us, because obviously we all know better. We do know who Christ is, and so if we deny Christ, then we'll be in a particularly bad part of hell. And denying Christ doesn't necessarily mean someone comes up to us and says, "Hey, are you Christian?" And you say, "No, I'm not Christian." Of course, that's a very blatant kind of denial of Christ. But the more common kind of denial of Christ that we all are constantly slipping into is really denying him in our deeds. Because if Christ says to love your neighbor, and we don't love our neighbor, or he says love our enemy when we don't love our enemy, well then by doing so we're denying Christ. And in other words, we're not following what he is given us. Of course, God has mercy on us, and he's not going to zap us every time we mess up, especially if we're in a state of trying to repent. But the point is that there are subtle ways to deny Christ, and all of these small denials can actually pile up and take us very far away from Christ if we're not worthy, if we're not careful. Okay. Oh, and yeah, and last week someone had asked about the benefit of praying for the departed. And so this would be actually a very appropriate time, not only because that's what this excerpt is about St. Macarius, but of course there's Saturday of the Souls today. And so it's one teaching of the church that there's several ways to benefit someone who has already left this life. And the reason why it's so important to benefit these people, to help them, is because they are in a state where they can't help themselves. Because this is something my elder would say to us frequently. He would say that we need to really feel sorry for all the people who are not in the world, who have left this world and now are in the other world, and for those who have not gone to heaven, because they aren't in a position to be able to do anything for themselves. They can't pray, they can't give alms, they can't be kind to someone, they can't, there's nothing they can do. And so they're in great need of help. And so they're really hoping and really relying on someone praying for them and someone trying to do them good through prayers. So and one of the most powerful ways to help someone who is not in who is in hell is to have them commemorated in the liturgy. And that's why we have these commemorations in church on a regular basis. But also it doesn't. But the other thing is, you don't have to wait until Saturday of the Souls to commemorate someone. I mean, you can commemorate people, and you should commemorate people in every liturgy. And in fact, there's a fascinating story from that our elder Ephraim once told us. That there's a true story about a priest who what he would do, he loved commemorating people's names, and so he would do is whenever people would give him lists of names to pray for, he would keep those names and never fill them out. Mm-hmm. So as a result, after years and years of being a priest, he had just these huge piles of names he would go through in every liturgy. And to spend a couple hours even just reading all the names and praying for them. So that's all fine and good, but then this priest, he had one weakness, and he liked to drink alcohol. And so from time to time he would get a little tipsy and a little drunk even. And there's one time when the night before liturgy, he got quite drunk, and so by the time it was time for liturgy, he was still sort of, recovering and sort of woozy. And so he did the liturgy, but then because he wasn't all there, he slipped and spilled some of the Holy Communion, which is of course a very, very serious thing. It is the body and blood of Christ himself, and for it to be spilled, and so whenever a priest does that, it's something that he has to confess to the bishop. It's not enough just to confess it to a priest. You have to really go to a bishop and confess this. And so when the priest went and confessed this to the bishop, of course he explained, the reason why I spilled the body and blood of Christ was because I was still a little, drunk from last night, this bishop was a very strict bishop. And so he sent this priest out of his room to really ponder what to do, because on the one hand the bishop really loved this priest. He knew he was a very prayerful person. He was but at the same time he did this big mistake, and you can't have a drunkard bishop, a drunkard priest, not only because it's dangerous for the priest to be serving when he's drunk, but also, and there's the more important thing, is that a priest has to be someone that people look up to, because if they don't respect the priest, well, then it'll be very hard for them to respect the church and to respect God and to love God. And so, and in fact, and that's one of the primary reasons why people end up leaving the church, is because of some priest or bishop who's not a good example, and people get scandalized, and they say, well, if this is what people devoted to God are like, I don't want anything to do with that kind of God. So anyway, so this bishop was praying and thinking about it, and he was thinking, well, I really just have to defrock this person. I need to fire him, in other words, make him no longer a priest, because this is a very serious situation. And so he was just getting the paper out ready to fill out the form to defrock this priest. And all of a sudden he saw just he had a vision of just hundreds and even thousands of people coming to him, standing up in front of him and saying, "Oh, Your Grace, Bishop, Father Bishop, don't defrock him, please don't defrock him. We need his prayers. We need his prayers. Don't defrock him." And so the bishop was really stunned by this, because he'd never had this kind of vision before. And so he called the priest back into his room and said, "Excuse me, Father, tell me what kind of priest? What do you do that's different from? Do you do anything different from other priests? I want to know what kind of work you do as a priest." And the priest said, "Well, I just do the services, but one thing I do that not all priests do is I actually really, really like commemorating names for the liturgy. And I have these huge, huge piles of names I commemorate every time I serve liturgy." And so then the bishop realized that all those people that had appeared to him were the souls of these people who were, benefiting from this priest's prayers. And so because of this, the bishop realized that, okay, well, there's yes, this person did a big mistake, but he's doing also so much good that he changed his mind and decided not to defrock him. And by God's grace and with the encouragement of the bishop, this priest actually got free of this passion. So yeah, so and that's just one story. I mean, let me give you also, just share with you another story that's from the Holy Fathers. So there was once a certain prisoner, a person who was in prison, and his parents thought his parents hadn't heard from him for a while, and so they thought he was dead. And so what his parents would do is 3 times a year they would have a liturgy especially for him and commemorate him on Theophany, Pascha, and Pentecost. But then what ended up happening is this person who was in captivity, in some foreign country, he ended up being released, and he returned unexpectedly to his parents, and of course they were overjoyed to see him, and they're just he was just telling them telling his parents about how he survived in this prison in this foreign country and everything, and he said that he said one thing that was very strange happened. He says every time it was Theophany, Pascha, and Pentecost, a certain man of glorious appearance came to me in prison carrying a torch, and whenever this glorious person came into the prison, the chains, the fetters fell from his hands, and I was freed. But then all the rest of the days I was in chains. And this something that Saint John the Merciful told about, because he's the one who had been told this story. And so and actually there's quite a few, so I'll just say a couple. But so here's one of a story of Saint Paisios of the Holy Mountain, and he said that once someone came to my hut and said to me in tears, "Yaranda, elder, I didn't pray on behalf of a certain reposed man who was an acquaintance of mine, and he appeared to me in my dreams. He told me it had been 20 days since he passed away, and I did not help him, and now he's suffering because I forgot him." And this monk said to Saint Pius, "Yeah, it's true. For 20 days, I'd totally forgotten him, and I wasn't praying for him, and I wasn't praying for myself either." So, in fact, there's another thing, another similar thing happened with Saint Ephraim of Katanakia, because he also, he was a priest and he would commemorate people in his liturgy, and so he had a lot of papers and he would just commemorate them all, and but then one day after the liturgy, and he rested for a little, and he had a vision of a group of some people, and they said to him, "Father, you didn't pray for us." And he's like, but oh, did I miss your names or what? So then he made sure that he did all the names. He thought maybe a name got like stuck together and he skipped a page. But then so the next time he did liturgy again, he commemorated all the names, made sure he did commemorate every single piece of paper he had. And again, in his rest after liturgy, these same people appeared to him and says, "Father, you had neglected us." And he's like, but wait, I thought I did everyone. So then the next day, before liturgy, he looked very carefully in the altar and saw that there are some papers. Hey, Yanni. He saw that there are some papers that had fallen between the cracks between the wall, and they had some names on them. And there was this time he commemorated them, and then they didn't appear to have been complaining that. Yeah, and so yeah, and there's also one other one here. Let me just get this other one here. Oh yeah, and well, there's this other story. This is what Saint Mark of Ephesus said. This is just a quote from his teachings. He says, "We can do nothing better or greater for the dead than to pray for them, offering commemoration for them at the liturgy. Of this they are always in need. The body feels nothing then," in other words, the body of these people who have departed. "It does not see its close ones who have assembled, does not smell the fragrance of the flowers, does not hear the funeral orations, but the soul senses the prayers offered for it, and it is grateful to those who make them and is spiritually close to them." Yeah, so there's a lot of and there's even a section in the Everyetinos of this is the Greek version of it though, but it's also in English, where they have a whole section devoted to the benefit that souls receive when they're commemorated, when they're prayed for. So yeah, so that is a very important and beautiful thing that should be done. Yes. Oh, here, pass on the.
So I know several stories that have happened to people where they put the list of names, and then the next day an aunt will come in the dream and say, "You forgot about me. Can you add me to your list?" Or someone else says, another instance, "Oh, I'm hungry too." Or someone's name was added, and then the very next day another relative would come and be like, "Please put me too."
Yeah.
People like that.
It is amazing.
I thought that was beautiful.
Yes, go ahead.
I know a story that this is a true story. The lady, she wrote apparently a lot of names to be read,
Yeah.
during the for the Most Memorial. And at night, she saw a dream. Her mother appeared, and she said, "Athanasia, what a beautiful table was this! Every time the father read our names nice and clearly, they all came one by one, the souls, and were sitting in a big table, and that she invited at the table all of her relatives, and her mother, who had passed through cancer, was telling her, what a beautiful table was this, that
Wow.
you invite us. In Greek, table means, dinner
Yeah.
or luncheon. And I just wanted to say that, this is stuck in my mind. Having said that, I would like to know, I do not know how to make a prospero. This is so important, of course, but somebody has to show us how to make it properly, because there are many recipes, but we know that it's supposed to be the yeast from the 14th of September, the Holy Cross.
The leaven.
Yes, and that we are not supposed to use the yeast that we buy at the grocery stores. And it's very, very interesting. I only saw on YouTube that one Russian lady, actually, who spoke very well Greek. She said she had gathered so many notes from different priests, and I think she did the most beautiful, showing the most beautiful way of making the prospero, which is when we bring the prospero, we bring the names of the dead people to be read, and I think that's so important.
Yeah.
If we can ever do that.
Yeah. So it is a beautiful thing because
learn.
And so and of course you can bring names for commemoration even if you don't know how to make prospera, but that's you can either. Yeah.
And Father, I was told that even if we have a list of names, we commemorate the departed, but I was told to also say pray for everybody. Just make sure you even just add that sentence, for all those who passed away. Just to make that statement, just because you may not know these people, but pray for all the souls. Pray for all the departed.
Yeah. And Elder Ephraim also told us in the monastery that it's also a beautiful thing on our own to just pray for people and pray for, not only because we need to pray not only for ourselves, but also to love other people, to love our neighbor, to pray for other people who are alive. But he said, especially we should pray, have time set aside for praying for the reposed. Yeah.
How often do you have to resubmit names? Like, how long does the priest keep them? Do you keep them?
Yeah. So every priest does it differently. Some priests will just keep names for one liturgy. Others will keep it for 40 liturgies, and so it also depends on like how many names he's given. So like when I was in Alaska, the people didn't give me very many names, so I was able to keep them for years and years. But now if that just wouldn't be practical, I wouldn't be able to keep them all. So there are different ways of doing that. Okay, so let's see. Let's move on to. Okay, so now here's another story from Saint Macarius. So there's number 39 at the bottom, page 91. Well, sorry, 191. So there's one day he was walking somewhere with one of his disciples, and so Saint Macarius said to him, "Oh, you go on ahead by yourself. I'll catch up." So as this disciple went on ahead, he happened to come across a priest of the pagans, and his disciple of Saint Macarius was not at all polite, and he said, "Hey, you demon, where are you running to?" In other words, he's calling, because he's calling him names because it's obvious he's not a Christian; he's a pagan priest. So this pagan priest turned around and beat him up, leaving him half dead, and then he took his club and ran on. So then a little while later, then he comes across Saint Macarius, and this the pagan priest is still running. Who knows why he was running anyway. And then Saint Macarius says to him, "Oh, I hope you are well. I hope you are well. You who are toiling." In other words, Saint Macarius felt sorry for this guy that he was running for. He was in a rush, whatever. And the pagan now who was amazed because apparently this pagan was accustomed to getting yelled at and berated by the Christians, and so he was amazed that this Christian monk wasn't like calling him names or anything. And so so out of amazement, the pagan priest said, "What good did you see in me that you saluted me like that?" And the Saint Macarius said, "Well, it's just that I saw you toiling, running, and he says, you do not know you are toiling to no avail. In other words, you're running and working so hard, but you don't realize that all your labors are just going to waste. In other words, because you're not praying to the right God, because you're not on track." And so then the priest said to him, "I was pricked in my conscience. I was moved by your greeting, and I can see that you are a man of God. You're with God." And then he went on to say, "Another monk, a bad one, met me, and I reviled him, so I gave him a few blows and put him." And he says, and put him to death, but he didn't actually die. Anyway, but yeah. So the elder perceived it that this was his disciple. Of course, because there's only it's this desert. Who else can be around? and the priest grasped his feet, saying, "I will not let you go unless you make me a monk." So then they took him with him, and then they found where his disciple was. They picked him up and brought him into the church of the mountain. And it says the other monks there, the brothers, were astounded when they saw that the priest, this pagan priest, was with Saint Macarius. And then he evidently he must have explained this, because then they made this pagan priest a monk. And it says many pagans became Christians through him. And then here's the moral of the story at the end. Saint Macarius says, "A harsh word makes the good bad, but a good word benefits everybody." Yeah. So that's just goes to show how we can, and what's really beautiful, it's just his inner disposition, how when he sees someone working hard but on the wrong track, instead of sort of writing on, say, well, what do you expect from those losers? What, of course, because we can be kind of guilty of the same thing too, because we see let's see, there's some scandal in the Catholic Church, and some whatever happens, we might be like, well, serves them right, or we like, yeah, that's what happens when you're outside the church, or whatever. But here we see that his mindset had a very different mindset. He was like, he felt genuinely sorry for him, but at the same time, even though he was genuinely sorry, feeling genuinely sorry for him, he wasn't being wishy-washy about what the truth is. In other words, he didn't say to this pagan priest, "Oh, well, there are many paths up the mountain, and you're going up yours, I'm going up mine." But he said straight out, you're doing all this labor for nothing. In other words, because you're not in the church, because you don't have Christ. And there's just one of just thousands and thousands of examples in the lives of the saints where we get these little glimpses into little snapshots of how they would behave in certain circumstances. And if we read between the lines, we see sort of their mindset. And I think that's one of the most important things for us to do as Orthodox Christians, is to try to acquire the mind of the church, the mind of the Holy Fathers, this mindset, this phronima, this way of thinking, because this way of thinking, it's not a matter of dogma in the sense that, we believe this about the Holy Trinity and this about Jesus Christ, but this is something very, very practical. It's something that, how we live our lives. In other words, how do we interact with people who are not Orthodox? And this here has a beautiful example, how by being, being compassionate to them, but still firm, we can have a tremendous effect, have a tremendous positive effect. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so here's so on page 193 at the top of this last one of St. Macarius, he said he was once, when he was a young monk, he was struggling with the temptation of despondency, of spiritual laziness. And so in order to fight this laziness, when you're just sitting in a cell, he'd say, okay, I'm going to get up and go out in the desert. And then I said to myself, I know what I'll do. I'll go just wander around till I meet someone. And then, and I'm going to pray to God that whoever I meet, that God will invite them to say something to my benefit. So he walked around, and finally found some child taking care of cattle. And so he said to this child, what should I do, young child? I'm hungry. The child said, well, eat. and then St. Macarius says, yeah, well, I did eat, but now I'm still hungry. And then the kid says, well, eat again. And then St. Macarius says, well, I did eat again, and I'm still hungry. And he says, well, you're clearly just a donkey, father, wanting to munch away all the time. and then now that's the end of the story. And then he says, I went my way having reaped benefit. And so it's, oh God, yeah. And so it's I mean, of course, this has to do with just if we, well, this is sort of a principle in the spiritual life, that if we want to find, if we have our eyes open, our eyes and ears open, then we can get benefit from every little thing that comes our way. And so this is just a sort of it's almost kind of a silly kind of example of how you can get benefit from some kid calling you a donkey. And the benefit, of course, was that he's being insulted and insulted. So the Holy Fathers always love it when they're insulted, because that's something that gives them more opportunity for humility. But the whole point is that these kinds of things are opportunities that we constantly have around us if we just have our eyes open.
So that was the benefit by hearing that insult. He learned.
Yeah.
He learned like something about himself.
Well, I mean, I don't think he learned something about himself, but I think, see, the way we are as human beings is that we are very much affected by the way people treat us. And so if everyone's saying, oh, you're so great, you're wonderful, you're the best, then imperceptibly it puffs you up, and you start thinking, wow, I am the best, Whereas if people, say insulting things to you and point out your mistakes, you'll have a much more humble-minded kind of approach. Of course, there is always the danger of falling into depression and thinking that there's no hope, that you can never be good. So there is that danger. But in general, the people who are on track with their spiritual life, these monks, they wouldn't fall into that kind of depression, but they would benefit much more from these insults of people not showing them respect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now moving on to Abba Moses on the bottom of page 193. And so Abba Moses, he had a lot of temptation with carnal thoughts, and he was just having so much getting so overwhelmed with them that he just had to go up and go speak with one of the elder monks. And the elder, the Abba Isidore, said to him, okay, well, just go back to your cell and keep fighting. But this Abba Moses said, but Father, I don't have the strength. And so then this elder Isidore said, okay, let's go up to the housetop, and I'll show you something. So he said, look to the west. And all of a sudden, the eyes of Saint Moses, Abba Moses, were open, and he saw an innumerable host of demons, just a whole army of demons, and they're all milling around together and shouting, ready for battle. And then Abba Isidore said to him, okay, now look to the east. And he looked and saw a huge number of armies of glorious holy angels. And then Abba Isidore said to him, so here, these are they who are sent by the Lord to help the holy ones, to the people struggling for their salvation. And those in the west, the demons, are the ones who are fighting them. But he points out, but those who are on our side, they are more numerous. So there are a lot more angels than demons. And so then it says, when he had given thanks for God for this, Abba Moses took courage and returned to his own self. And so, yeah, and this is something that we tend to forget in our spiritual warfare and in the struggle, that yes, there are a lot of demons, and yes, they are stronger than us when we don't have Christ's help. But then we also have our guardian angel and all the angels, and so we really do have more help. It's just that we have to call upon Christ and on our guardian angel so that they will be helping us. Okay, so now there's this classic. There's one of the stories that Abba Moses is the most famous for, number 2 there on top of 194. It says what happened was that there was all the monks in the area got together once for a council, and the reason why they're having this council is because one of the other monks had fallen into some serious sin. And so the monks were going to get together and decide, okay, what are we going to do with this monk, because he's not living the way monks should live, and they're probably going to punish him or kick him out or whatever. So, but since Abba Moses knew that they were going to be attacking this other monk for having made a mistake in some way, he didn't even want to go to the meeting. But then the priests answer him and says, "Come, everyone's waiting for you." So Saint Moses finally said, "Okay, I'll come." But when he came, and what he did is he took a basket with him, and filled it with, that had of course a lot of little holes in it. He filled it with sand and carried it with him all the way there. And so when they came out to meet Saint Moses when he came to this meeting, they said, "Hey, what's this basket with the sand spilling out through the sides, all the cracks?" And he says, "My sins are running out behind me, and I do not see them. Yet here I have come today to pass judgment on the faults of another." And they're like, "Ooh," and then they realize. So then it says, yeah. Then they realize, well, yeah, that we also have our own sins, and so we decide not, and they decide not to say anything to the brother and forgave him. And so it's sort of there's obviously sort of an extension of what Christ said when they brought the woman who was caught red-handed in adultery, and Christ said to them, he who is without sin, let him cast the first stone. And so they're all like, well, yes. So anyway, so yeah, so that's a very there's such a beautiful way of illustrating it, because I mean it also, Saint Moses could have actually just said it to them, like Christ said he was with us, but these monks, they're very, I don't know, there's something very they like to actually do things and show and demonstrate things, like, and you probably saw that also when we were doing Abba Dorothea, how when Abba Dorothea wanted to teach people that we need to fight the passions when they're young and not when they're old, he didn't tell them that in just like a 5-second teaching and then it's over. He said, "Okay, let's go out to the forest." Then he started, "Okay, you pull out this tree, that tree," and then he showed them you can't pull out the big ones, only the little ones. So yeah, I guess it's a different kind of culture they had back then. All right, so now the next two, Moses 3 and Moses number 4 on page 194. These are some stories where they're making fun of Abba Moses because he was Ethiopian. In other words, he had dark skin, whereas apparently most of them were light-skinned people. And so and so they would say, so one time there was one time there's a council, a meeting of them, and they wanted to, the other monks wanted to put them to the test and say, what's this Ethiopian coming here for, and but then after but he kept quiet and didn't say anything. And then one of them came out afterwards. They came and says, "Father, weren't you troubled when we insulted you like that?" And he said, "Yes, I was troubled, but I did not speak." This is so evidently at this time in his life, he hadn't reached perfection because again, if you remember what Abba Dorotheos said about being insulted, there's different levels of dealing with insults in a positive way and a negative way. So, for example, he was saying if a person says one insult to you, if you go and say 10 insults back to him, well, obviously you're giving into your passion of anger and revenge. But one person might only say one insult back, but still he's still in a state of going away from God, going a passionate state. But then he says other states that are even better. You can be insulted and troubled inwardly, but not say anything. And so that's a positive thing, but it's still not the most perfect thing. And the most perfect thing would be if you're insulted, to not even be troubled and just feel sorry for this person that's all riled up and insulting you. So yeah, it is huge. Yeah. That is a beautiful thing. I mean, and that's basically like what it's basically similar to what, like when Saint Stephen, the first martyr, was being stoned, was being killed. He was so tender-hearted towards the people, towards everyone, that he wasn't worried his concern wasn't like, oh wow, I just broke my bone, this hurts, but he was thinking, he was just pray, he said, Father, please forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. So yeah, and Christ as well. Yeah. So this is the perfect kind of love where you're so unconcerned about your own self that you're just loving your neighbor. So yeah, that's a lofty level.
I was thinking
Yeah.
I was thinking like of the Panagia, like we prayed to her for her intercessions, but we crucified her son, and she is so loving that she does it.
Yeah.
Papa Sam,
Yes,
sorry,
Joanna.
the one way you just said about insulting, again, that's all with discernment, right? Like that's all with discernment and the relationship we have with people around us. Is it more of like daily insults from people around us, or is that also, because everything is like you've always said with discernment and when to speak up, when not to speak up, because if someone insults you once, twice, but if it's continuous, then we kind of have to be firm, and then you help them as well. So is it more with discernment with every situation?
Yeah. So I mean, when we're talking about something that becomes abuse, well, then this is where we need to be a little bit cautious, because if someone is abusing us, then the best thing to do is often to put our foot down and keep a boundary, and there's two reasons for this. One reason is because if someone's abusing us and we're trying to be patient, what usually ends up happening is we end up building up resentment and anger, even if we're keeping our mouth shut. But then at some point we're just going to explode, and it'll be 10 times worse. But the other reason is because if someone is abusing us and we don't speak up, then our silence sort of encourages them to continue the abuse, and then that's a sin on their part too, not only towards us, but that in general that person would be encouraged to be a bully in general. So there is a time to speak out when you're being abused or insulted, and there's also a time when you can say, okay, well, this time it's not to the point where I'm encouraging abuse. I'll just put up with, I'll just bow my head and move on and reap the benefits of being humble here. Okay.
Thank you.
Papa.
Yep, thank you.
Yes.
Papa.
Yes.
Where so when I think of the story of St. Makaros a few stories back, or St. Gabriel of Georgia as another example with the cherry juice.
Yeah.
Excuse me. These saints, particularly the fools for Christ, it seems like they aren't afraid to, make fools of themselves, have people ridicule them, even do some things that are, a bit provocative, to, or perhaps for the benefit of, the individuals around them. But,
Hmm.
in the case of like St. Gabriel of Georgia, for example, with this cherry juice, he
Can,
goes
can,
out, people
can you
think he's a,
can you tell us the cherry juice story?
yeah. So he, my understanding is he would be out in public, for an example, and have a flask of cherry juice. People would think he was drunk. He would act, flamboyant, or um, perhaps just a little bit over the top, right? And finally, one day, so the full story where the cherry juice comes in, there's three boys that are visiting him, and they all think that he's drunk, and two of them are extremely scandalized and can't handle it. This is an Orthodox priest. What are you doing? And they just make fun of him and leave. And the third boy walks up and kind of, Father, please forgive us. And he looks at him and gives a wink and has the boy take a taste. And the boy realizes it's cherry juice, that he isn't drunk at all. Right. So where's the line that these saints, with their incredible, beautiful discernment, have between doing things that may, cause them to be ridiculed or talked down to, or insulted, but
Hmm.
is causing others to fall into judgment, or is causing others to fall into, some type of sin in that way? And is the goal simply, no, you shouldn't be judging anyone, learn your lesson? But if you're doing it with someone who's kind of prone to, if you're out at a bar late at night anyway, I mean, where is there any sort of guidance or clarity that the church provides us for those sorts of extreme examples?
Yeah. So the whole thing about these fools for Christ is that this is an exceptional kind of path, that it's not generally something that any person would follow. Oh, and only if a person would receive permission from their spiritual father would they go on this extreme kind of behavior where they would intentionally do things to scandalize people in order to get more insults, but also to hide their holiness. And so there's the first fool for Christ was named Andrew, and he lived in Constantinople, and he was his life story is something really fascinating. It has so many examples of just God's supernatural grace intervening in his life. And but what happened was Saint Andrew did this not only with a blessing of his spiritual father, but also he was constantly praying that God would not hold against these people that were insulting him and judging him. And so because God, and it said that God heard his prayer. So in other words, he was able to get people to be, to treat him poorly and judge him, but without it being counted against them. So I believe that this is probably this holds true for all fools for Christ, including Saint the Gabriel of Georgia. Yeah.
Thank you, Papa.
Yeah, and so, but in general, we don't. I mean, we don't. This is not something we are encouraged to do, to start behaving like a fool for Christ, and to do things intentionally to make people have a bad opinion of us, because the reality is that there's there are already enough people with a bad opinion of us, that we don't really need more. All we need to do is just sort of be aware of that, and use that as fuel for humility, and that everyone's laughing because we all know it's true. There's plenty of people that yeah fools for Christ. It's quite I mean, there's several lives of there. I mean, there's many of them have been translated into English. One thing I found very interesting, though, about these fools for Christ, if you look at, I mean, just historically, geographically where they were. I mean, there were a few in Byzantium. There are a few, there's this in Georgia, but then they're like dozens and dozens of them in Russia.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like they have this, they've like monopolized it. They're like experts in being fools. And yeah, I wonder if there's even some like cultural or like some psychological thing going on there where it makes it easier for
The
them.
environment that they lived under too probably made it easier.
Yeah, yeah. It's sometimes I wonder because
They learn
Yeah.
Russian literature too and paintings.
Oh, yeah.
I was, Father, I was thinking about Saint Xenia from St. Petersburg.
Saint Xenia, yeah, that's it.
That she was so full.
Yeah, that's a beautiful life of Saint Xenia of Saint Petersburg. It's another amazing saint.
After her husband died, she
Yeah.
became full for Christ.
Yeah,
And she started acting crazy and foolish and
Yeah.
scandalizing people and, you know. And she started wearing his clothes.
yeah.
Yes, and dressing like a man because she said that I don't remember his name, he's not dead and I'm living, he's
Yeah.
living through me or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And she was, homeless and sleeping outside. And
Yeah.
so, but at the same time doing miracles and
Yeah,
wonders.
Yeah. yeah. So it is.
Papa Ephraim, is that something they're inclined to do, to be fools for Christ? Is that like an essence of, because the average person is not able to do that. Is that something that they're kind of like have the Holy Spirit inside of them to be able to do that?
Yeah. So the problem with these fools for Christ. Well, the problem with trying to do what the fools for Christ did is that almost all of us would fail miserably, because, I mean, for example, how many of us would be able to just be homeless and on the streets and not eat anything for weeks and weeks and have everyone saying, "Oh, that's he used to be a good person. Now he's a loser. He's dying," and and for everyone to be making fun of you and yet, despite being in that situation, to keep your sense of prayer and love for all people, and so it is one of the extreme forms of asceticism, and because it's such an extreme kind of thing, it would be very dangerous to try to do this without the blessing of your spiritual father, without having a real calling from Christ for this. So yeah, so so it's not something that we just say, yeah, I think I'm going to be a fool for a little while. I see how that goes. Because the truth is, when someone does want to do that, 9 times out of 10, it'll be because they want to be glorified as a fool for Christ. They're using reverse psychology to get even more glory, rather than the true way that the fools for Christ would do is they would do it in order to get more insults. So it's a very backwards motivation that a lot of people would have for this kind of thing. Yeah. Yes, obviously.
Yeah, just thinking about the fool for Christ. One person, one character that comes into mind. Maybe people have seen the movie, The Island. And
yeah.
I don't know if this, yes, and I'm not sure if this is something that all fools for Christ have in common. But just thinking about that character, that perhaps the things that they did, which scandalized, but when they did these things, it seems the common denominator, if I may say, is that they did it so that the passions of the other person whom they're doing it to become more clear, so that they can be helped.
Yeah.
And of course, if someone doesn't have the eyes to see that, would be like, oh, either he's like a crazy guy. But it seems like it really helped the people that they were pointing. So, for instance, in that movie, the example of this monk who had this list of passions, and yet in the end, it helped him to see them and correct it. So I don't know if that's like the fine line, as the question earlier came up.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. Of course, these saints who are genuine fools for Christ, they are full of love for people, and they are finding these subtle, indetectable ways to actually help people and really, keep them, help them overcome whatever struggle they have. Yeah. Okay. So now moving on now to the bottom 194, Moses number 5. It said there's once all the monks in the skip decide, okay, we're gonna fast this week. In other words, we're not gonna be cooking any food. But then it just so happened that some other monks from Egypt, from far away, came and visited Abba Moses at the skip while there was a fasting time. And so what he did was he cooked some food for them. And then the other monks who saw, smoke coming out of this chimney, they went and told the priests, said, "Hey, Moses broke the rules. He cooked some food for himself." And so the priests said, "Okay, we'll speak to him about this when he comes." And then so because what they would do is every weekend they would come together and talk. So when Saturday came around, the clergy, the priests, who are well aware of the great discipline of Abba Moses, in other words, they knew that he was a real fighter. He was not at all a glutton in any way. They knew what had really happened, that he didn't cook food for himself, but for these visitors. And so they said to him in front of everybody, "Oh, Abba Moses, you have broken the rules of men, but have followed the rules of God." In other words, the rule of God is to show love and hospitality and to care for people. And so even though it broke their rules, they were able to see through that he was really doing God's will here. And so
Father, is this Moses that was once a thief and a
yeah. So this is the Abba Moses he used to be a thief, and he wasn't just a thief. Can you get the door? He wasn't just any old thief. He was like the leader of the thieves. Yeah, he was like the number one because he was so violent and strong and yeah. Okay, we just have a little bit of time for one more here. So and at the bottom 195 to 196, it's while they're sitting there in their monastery there in the skit, he had because he had the gift of clairvoyance, he was able to see that barbarians are coming to kill them. And so he said to the other monks, "Get up and run away." And he said, "But aren't you, Father, gonna run away also?" And he said, "I've been waiting so many years for this day so that the words of Christ, my Lord and Master, may be fulfilled." It says, all those who live by the sword shall die by the sword. And so what this is this is a saying, because this is what Christ said to Peter when he was trying to defend him when he was being arrested in Gethsemane. And so then they said, "Well, neither will we run away. We'll also die with you." And he said, "Well, it's up. If you want to die, it's up to you. But you need to decide for yourself." And he said that there were 7 brothers, and then when the barbarians did come and kill them, they killed all of them except one who ran away. He hid behind some pile of rope. But this brother who survived saw 7 crowns coming down and descending on all those who were martyred. So, but one just interesting thing about this saying, the saying that all who live by the sword will die by the sword. There's actually something about this that's actually incorrect, because not everyone. First of all, not everyone who kills with a sword ends up dying by a sword. But the reason why Christ's words are actually true is because what he actually said was not that, but he said, because in Aramaic, which is the language that Christ spoke, which Jesus was speaking, the phrase "die by the sword" actually means, it's an idiomatic phrase that means "will surely die." So when Christ said to Peter, what Christ was really saying to Peter was, all those who take the sword will surely die. Not that they will die by the sword, even though that's the literal meaning in Aramaic, but the idiom is that all those who take the sword will surely die, rather. And so that's why actually Abba Moses was wrong. But in a sense, he was right, because in his sense of justice, he was thinking, well, I was a thief, I was a murderer. It's fair. I mean, I want justice to prevail, and it's only fair that I get the death sentence and die and be killed, because I was someone who also killed people. So in that sense, he was definitely right. But in terms of the literal interpretation of the Aramaic, there's something that actually very few people know this about the Aramaic, because, well, everyone bases themselves on the Greek Bible, and only a few people, especially in recent times, would actually look at the Aramaic and say, hey, wait, this is an idiom. So.
Wow.
And one actually very fascinating thing is there are some people, there's no time to get into now, but there are some people that even suspect that some of the Gospels or the Gospel of Matthew specifically was actually first written in Aramaic and then translated into Greek. And that because there was a person in the 2nd century, I think it was 2nd, 3rd century, Eusebius, who just sort of in passing mentioned, oh yeah, and then there's that gospel written by Matthew in Hebrew. But we don't know any gospel of him written in Hebrew other than the gospel that we have in Greek. So what scholars think that perhaps Saint Matthew first wrote his gospel in Aramaic and then translated, because not a lot of people knew Aramaic. He translated into Greek. Or other scholars think, well, maybe he just had kept notes in Aramaic, his native language, and then actually wrote the gospel in Greek. So anyway, we better stop there this time. So anyway, so thanks for coming. I'll see you next week, same time. So through the prayers of our Holy Fathers, Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us. All right, God bless you all.
Thank you,
God
Father.
bless
Thank
us,
you,
Papa
Father.
Ephraim.
Good day.
Kyrios.
Papa Ephraim.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, there's orange juice and apple juice and milk also in the fridge if you want it.
So
Thank you.
Bye, Agnes.
After
Yes.
the liturgy, we'll have the kneeling.
Yeah. So the kneeling prayers tomorrow, they're actually supposed to be done in the Vespers of Sunday evening, and that's how things are done in the monasteries. But in the parishes, it would be too much of a hassle for people to come back on Sunday evening to church and have Vespers and do all the kneeling prayers. So for economia, as they say, for practicality, the most parishes in this place included will have the kneeling prayers on Sunday after liturgy.